From Delhi is being used for boring through soil, and it arrived at the under construction tunnel in Uttarkashi in Uttarkhand, where 40 labourers are trapped under portions of a collapsed tunnel. The auger machines that were used earlier in the rescue operations did not give the desired results, because of which the new American machine had to be sourced. The new machines were flown in an Indian Air Force Hercules C-130J transport aircraft to an airstrip that is close to the site of the accident, from where it was taken to the tunnel construction site. Meanwhile, protests have erupted outside the tunnel, with the protesters demanding the immediate evacuation of the workers who've been trapped inside for 4 days now. The protests are being held by the workers who are employed for construction of this tunnel.
सर 11 तारीख से हमारे आदमी अंदर फंसे हुए हैं जी, और उनके निकालने के लिए कोई वो नहीं हो रहा है। नंबर 3 यार मशीन एक मशीन लाए कल, वो भी पुरानी मशीन लाए, वो भी काम नहीं कर रही है। और प्रशासन है, दुनिया भर का प्रशासन टूट रखा है। कोई नहीं, रात को सारा प्रशासन जो है बाहर निकल जाते हैं। कोई ब्रह्मकाल ठेके में देखो ऑनलाइन लगी है इनके, यहाँ पे रात को कोई नहीं रहता है। और वहाँ पे जो हमारे आदमी अंदर फंसे, आज 5 दिन हो गए, 5 रात हो गए, उनको बचाने के लिए कोई कार्य नहीं चल रहा। इसलिए जो है हम सब लोग जो है उसमें है कि उनको बचाओ किसी भालों से।
एक मशीन मंगाई और वो खराब हो गई। अभी बैकअप के लिए उनके पास कुछ भी नहीं है। अभी बोले दिल्ली से मशीन आई, कितना टाइम दिल्ली से यहाँ मशीन आते आते लगेगा, और इनका कोई सिस्टम समझ में नहीं आ रहा सर। एक से ये टीमें आ रही यहाँ पे, कौन क्या कर रही है, जा रही है कंपनी अंदर पे, ये मशीन आ रही है, आ रहे बाहर बोला सक्सेस नहीं है, सक्सेस नहीं है। तो अब कौन करेगा? एनडीआरएफ का के लिए आ रही है, एसडीआरएफ का के लिए, आईटीबीपी का के लिए आ रही है सर। इस कंपनी का कोई जीएम कहाँ है, इसका पीएम कहाँ है, इसका कोई दिख नहीं रहा सर। इस कंपनी का नहीं दे रहा, और हमको कोई औरों को अथॉरिटी भी नहीं दे रही कि कोई अंदर घुसे।
मैं इस कंपनी में कार्यरत हूँ सर। 5 दिन हो गए हमारे बंदों को अंदर हुए। वो चाहे कहीं के भी हो, है तो अपना ही है ना। दर्द हमें नहीं हो रहा। त्योहार का पता नहीं चला कि ये दीपावली कैसे हम लोगों ने मनाए, तो नहीं मनाए।
Over 150 personnel from the National Disaster Response Force, the State Disaster Response Force, the Indo-Tibetan Border Police and Border Roads Organization have been working round the clock to reach the trapped workers. Authorities say the rescue operation could take another 2 days. Fortunately, there are no reports of any casualties.
बाहर आएंगे और तब मैं बाहर आऊंगा। अगर यहाँ पे होता तो बहुत जल्दी मतलब सुविधा हो जाती है, पर अभी हमें ये नहीं दिखाई दे रहा यहाँ पे कि जो है उनको बाहर आने की निकासी हो रही हो। मेन गेट है, जब तक अब तक तो कब बाहर आ जाती है। पहले तो जब इंसान का अगर शरीर नहीं है तो कुछ नहीं है, और कल अंदर किसी को भी कुछ हो जाएगा तो क्या फायदा। अब हम लोग यहाँ पे श्रमदान करते हैं, एक मिलन के लिए रखे हैं। वो तो हमने एक रिक्वेस्ट की थी कि जरा कम से कम उनके लड़के से बात करा दो, है ना। और जहाँ वहाँ पर मशीन लगती है और वो लोग मिट्टी श्रमदान करके कब बाहर आ जाते, है ना। और इंसान है, जान है तो जहान है ना। और अगर इस सृष्टि में अभी भी बता दिया कल पुष्कर सिंह धानी जाए, पर यहाँ पे हमें ये नहीं लग रहा है कि उनकी बहुत जल्दी व्यवस्था। तो जो है जब सब चीज की फैसिलिटी है
अंदर। मेरा चाचा का लड़का मेरा भाई खास भाई है, और हम कोटद्वार से आई हैं। जब कल कोटद्वार के न्यूज चैनल वालों ने से न्यूज चैनल के माध्यम से हमको पता चला कि हमारा उत्तरकाशी में ऐसी घटना हो गई, तो हम कल अपनी गाड़ी बुक करके यहाँ पहुंचे। कल रात को पहुंचे थे, और सवेरे यहाँ आए तो हमने इनको बोला था कि भाई हम कोटद्वार से आए, हमसे अपने भाई से बात करनी है। इन्होंने पहले तो मना कर दिया था, फिर बाद में हमने बोले कम से इनके लड़के से बात कराओ। तो लड़का बात करे कि घर में सब चिंतित है, सब परेशान हो रहे हैं, है ना। सब परेशान हो रहे हैं, सब रो रहे हैं। हमने भी खाना कल से भी ठीक ढंग से निकाला, घर में कोई ठीक ढंग से खाना खाया। हमने जब उन्होंने बोला जब इनसे बात होगी तभी हम खाना खाएंगे।
मेरे पापा है, जिनका नाम गबर सिंह नेगी है, वो यहाँ के सुपरवाइजर है। और आज सुबह 8:30 बजे मेरी बात हुई उनसे, तो उन्होंने यही बोला कि हौसला दे रहा हूँ मैं सबको, और घर में ये बोलना कि मैं यहाँ ठीक हूँ, और यहाँ कंपनी बहुत जोरों शोरों से काम चल रही है, सभी काम कर रहे हैं यहाँ पर।
ठीक है, बहुत आपने खुद बात की उनसे?
जी, मैंने
पाइप के थ्रू?
जी, पाइप के थ्रू की बात।
कुशल हैं वो सब लोग?
जी, सब कुशल मंगल।
देखिए, फिलहाल हमारी टीम स्टैंड बाई पर है, और जो काम है ये मैनुअल वर्क नहीं है, इसमें हैवी मशीनरी का इस्तेमाल किया जा रहा है। और एक्सपर्ट जो हैं वो कोशिश में हैं कि एक रास्ता बनाया जाए। कम्युनिकेशन एस्टैब्लिश हो गया है, और इसमें जो फंसे हुए वर्कर्स हैं उनको ऑक्सीजन, पानी और खाद्य सामग्री भी उनको मुहैया कराया गया है। तो फिलहाल वो सुरक्षित हैं, और ये बताया जा रहा है कि तकरीबन 50-60 मीटर का एरिया है जो एक खुला एरिया है जहां पर वो फंसे हुए हैं, तो वो भी एक अच्छी बात है कि उनको मूवमेंट करने के लिए जगह है, कैविटी में नहीं है, वो सेफ हैं। कोशिश ये की जा रही है कि जल्द से जल्द रास्ता बनाया जाए, स्टील पाइप्स डालने की कोशिश की जा रही है जिससे कि उन तक पहुंचा जा सके और उसके थ्रू उनको सुरक्षित निकाला जा सके।
Auger machines are used for laying horizontal pipes without digging trenches. These machines were initially utilized but failed to achieve the desired outcome. The American auger has been requisitioned by New Delhi. The new machine has been flown in from Delhi to Uttarkashi for rescue operations. The rescue operation is difficult because of the condition of the soil. The soil at the mishap site is loose. Boring is needed to be carried out, but with extreme care to prevent any further collapse. 40 labourers trapped inside this collapsed tunnel are safe and being provided with packets of food. A pressure pipe of 4-inch diameter has been inserted to supply dry fruits to the trapped workers. Oxygen too is being pumped through empty pipes meant for water supply. A pressure pipe of 4-inch diameter has been inserted, as we said, to supply dry fruits to the trapped workers. Oxygen is also being pumped through empty pipes meant for water supply. On to the elections in 5 states across India. The Election Commission has now issued a show cause notice to Congress leader Priyanka Gandhi Vadra, responding to a complaint by the BJP. The complaint alleged that Priyanka Gandhi made false and unverified statements against Prime Minister Narendra Modi during an election rally in Madhya Pradesh. The BJP has accused Priyanka Gandhi of making a baseless and false claim that the Modi government had privatized public sector undertakings. The specific allegation that she made was that Prime Minister Modi had given away PSU BHEL to his industrialist friends. The Election Commission has asked Priyanka Gandhi to explain her statement by 8 p.m. on the 16th of November. The Election Commission has asked political parties to furnish by the 15th of November all details of the donations that they've received through electoral bonds since the inception of the scheme. The development comes after the Supreme Court directed the Election Commission to produce up-to-date data of funds received by political parties through electoral bonds till the 30th of September this year. In a letter addressed to the heads of all political parties on the 3rd of November, the election panel sought details with regard to donors against each bond, the amount of each bond and the full particulars of the credit received against each and every bond. Prime Minister Narendra Modi embarked on a significant 2-day visit to Jharkhand, making history with his first ever visit to Ulihatu in Kunti district. The visit began with a 45-minute roadshow from the Birsa Munda airport, drawing thousands of enthusiastic well-wishers along the route to Raj Bhavan. On Wednesday, the Prime Minister paid tributes to tribal activist and freedom fighter Birsa Munda on his birth anniversary. The visit also included a meeting with Birsa Munda's family. The Prime Minister also addressed the public in Kunti, sharing insights into his positive meeting with the family of Birsa Munda. The occasion also witnessed the launch of the Tribal Mission, a transformative initiative worth 24,000 crore for tribals across India. The Prime Minister also participated in the Tribal Pride Day program, reinforcing the government's commitment to the comprehensive development of tribal communities.
मेरे परिवारजनों, जनजातीय गौरव और संघर्ष के प्रतीक भगवान बिरसा मुंडा की गाथा हर देशवासी को प्रेरणा से भर देती है। झारखंड का कोना कोना ऐसे ही महान विभूतियों को, उनके हौसलों और अनथक प्रयासों से जुड़ा है। तिलका मांझी, सिद्धू कान्हू, चांद भैरव, फूलो जानो, नीलांबर, पीतांबर, जत्रा ताना भगत और अल्बर्ट एक्का जैसे अनेक वीरों ने इस धरती का गौरव बढ़ाया है। अगर हम आजादी के आंदोलन को देखें तो देश का ऐसा कोई कोना नहीं था जहां आदिवासी योद्धाओं ने मोर्चा नहीं लिया हो। मानगढ़ धाम में गोविंद गुरु के योगदान को कौन भूल सकता है। मध्य प्रदेश के तंत्या भील, भीमा नायक, छत्तीसगढ़ के शहीद वीर नारायण सिंह, वीर गुंडाधुर, मणिपुर की रानी गाइडिन्ल्यो, तेलंगाना के वीर रामजी गोंड, आदिवासियों को प्रेरित करने वाले आंध्र प्रदेश के अल्लूरी सीताराम राजू, गौंड प्रदेश की रानी दुर्गावती, ये वो विभूतियां हैं जिनका देश आज भी ऋणी है। ये देश का दुर्भाग्य है कि आजादी के बाद ऐसे वीरों के साथ न्याय नहीं हुआ। मुझे संतोष है कि आजादी के 75 वर्ष होने पर अमृत महोत्सव के दौरान हमने ऐसे वीर वीरांगनाओं को याद किया, उनकी स्मृतियों को अगली पीढ़ी तक पहुंचाया।
Some tragic news coming in from Jammu and Kashmir's Doda district, where a bus accident has claimed more than 25 lives and left many others injured. The bus carrying 40 passengers skidded off the road near Trungal Asar on the Uttarkashi National Highway, plunging 300 feet downhill. Some of the injured are reported to be in a critical condition. The injured have been admitted to Asar's primary health care centre. More details are awaited. Those are visuals of the injured being taken to the nearest hospital. As we said, this bus was carrying 40 passengers, and reports suggest that at least 25 have died after the bus plunged into a gorge going 300 feet downhill. These are disturbing images of some of the injured passengers who have been rushed to hospital. More details of this accident are awaited, while 25 have already been declared dead. Many of those who've received injuries are said to be in a critical condition and currently undergoing treatment at this hospital. Let's now get you a complete lowdown on the Israel-Hamas war.
The following content may contain visuals that are disturbing, graphic, or sensitive in nature. Viewer discretion is advised. This material is intended for mature audiences and may not be suitable for all viewers. Please exercise caution while watching, and if you find such content distressing, we recommend discontinuing viewing. This disclaimer is provided to ensure awareness and to prioritize viewer well-being.
The war between Israel and Hamas has now entered its 40th day. Let's get you all the latest developments. As per the Gazan Health Ministry, at least 11,300 Palestinians have been killed in the Israeli counter-offensive so far. According to Israeli authorities, 1,200 Israeli nationals were killed in Hamas terror attacks on the 7th of October. Of the more than 11,000 Palestinians killed in Gaza, at least 4,500 were children, more than 3,000 were women. Israeli tanks have entered Gaza's largest hospital, the Al-Shifa complex. The Israeli Defense Forces have said they're carrying out a precise and targeted operation in Al-Shifa, which they believe houses the command and control headquarters of Hamas. Meanwhile, Houthis have fired ballistic missiles once again towards Israel, and heavy rains are adding to the woes of Palestinians in Gaza who are already under relentless bombardment from the Israeli Air Force. The Israeli military has said it has carried out a raid against Hamas terrorists in Al-Shifa hospital, which was the largest hospital in Gaza. The IDF has urged Hamas terrorists to surrender, with thousands of Palestinian civilians still sheltering inside this hospital. Eyewitnesses at the hospital have reported hearing gunfire and loud explosions as the Israeli Defense Forces entered the complex. The Israeli forces are said to have first raided the surgery and emergency departments. The IDF said the operation was based on intelligence inputs and operational necessity. The IDF teams include medical teams and Arabic speakers who've undergone specified training for this military operation with the intent, they say, that no harm should be caused to the civilians who are being used by Hamas as human shields. The IDF has said the hospital had become the command and control center for the Hamas terror group. The United States has said its own intelligence supports Israel's conclusions about Al-Shifa hospital. Hamas has said that it holds Israel and US President Joe Biden fully responsible for the operation at Al-Shifa. Israeli forces have waged fierce street battles against Hamas fighters over the past 10 days before advancing into the center of Gaza City and surrounding Al-Shifa hospital. Israel has sworn to destroy Hamas in retaliation for the terror group's cross-border assault on Israel on the 7th of October that left 1,200 Israelis, most of them civilians, dead, and close to 250 were taken hostage. So what do we know so far about the Al-Shifa hospital, and why is it now at the center of the Israel-Hamas conflict? Al-Shifa is Gaza's largest hospital. Thousands of Palestinians are believed to be sheltering here. The hospital has run out of fuel and is no longer considered operational. The WHO, in fact, made this announcement yesterday. Doctors have warned of catastrophic consequences for patients who are stuck at this hospital. Israeli air attacks earlier targeted the hospital as well, and now, as we said, the Israeli Defense Forces have stormed Al-Shifa. Why is the Israel Defense Forces targeting Al-Shifa? Control of Al-Shifa is Israel's key military and political aim. Israel says Hamas bunkers and military infrastructure are present on the premises of Al-Shifa. The IDF says Hamas headquarters are located under this hospital. IDF has alleged Hamas is using patients and medical staff as human shields. And what has the Palestinian Health Ministry said? The Gaza Health Ministry says tanks and dozens of soldiers are inside Al-Shifa hospital. Dozens of soldiers entered the hospital emergency department building, according to several reports. The Health Ministry says dozens of babies' lives are at risk as incubators at the hospital have run out of power. Israeli forces are carrying out raids, as we said, at the Al-Shifa hospital, Gaza's largest hospital, and doctors have warned of an impending catastrophe. Here's a look at a story that explains how the resources of the hospital are extremely stretched at this moment, even as these raids by the IDF continue.
Inside Gaza's Al-Shifa hospital, rows of tiny newborns, some premature and wrapped in cloth for warmth. They're in grave danger with each passing minute. They've been taken out of their incubators because the hospital doesn't have enough power. Outside the hospital, Israeli tanks, which took up positions at its gates on Monday. Israel says Al-Shifa sits on top of a Hamas headquarters, using the hospital's patients as human shields, which Hamas denies. This video from Israel's military is said to show its soldiers delivering fuel for the hospital. Israel says it attempted to evacuate the babies, but was blocked by Hamas. Dr. Ahmed El Mokhalalati is a surgeon that's been caring for them. He says they're slowly dying.
Currently, we have 36 minutes survived, which means we have lost 3 over the last 24 hours. They are not that much covered in a way that temperature is not controlled. The only adjusted thing is the AC and the heater one. They will be crying. These ones, we feed them through a tube. We call it NG tube, trying to feed them. So they are literally in a very bad situation where you slowly kill them unless someone interferes to adjust or to improve their situation.
Al-Shifa, which is Gaza's main hospital, has been a major hotspot of the war for weeks, taking in wounded or the homeless. The Gaza Health Ministry spokesperson, who's inside the hospital, said Monday that it had lost 32 patients over 3 days from the conditions, including the infants. They also say Israeli drones and snipers are firing into the hospital, making it impossible for medics to move around the halls, which Reuters could not immediately verify.
U.S. President Joe Biden has said the Al-Shifa hospital in Gaza City must be protected, as must other hospitals, and he's expressed the hope that there will be less intrusive action at these healthcare centers. Biden's statement to reporters came at an event at the Oval Office. Israel has carried out raids at this particular hospital, despite Biden's statement on the need to protect hospitals.
You know, I have not been reluctant in expressing my concerns what's going on. And it's my hope and expectation that there will be less intrusive action relative to the hospital. We're in contact and we're with the Israelis. Also, there's an effort to take this pause to deal with the release of prisoners. And that's being negotiated as well with the Qataris are engaged, and so I remain somewhat hopeful. But the hospital must be protected.
Among thousands of Palestinians who are fleeing northern Gaza and seeking safety in the south is a mother and her children who fled to Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis after the Al-Shifa hospital in the north of the Gaza Strip was bombed. Take a look at this report.
We thought the hospital was a safe place, but it wasn't. If we had stayed another 5 minutes, we would have been killed. They started to bomb us and we ran away from Al-Shifa. My son got injured, so I left him there in the hospital to get treatment. I just couldn't take him with me. I was tired and afraid. I went to my nephew and told him to stay with my son, and then we fled. I came here to Nasser Hospital Complex for protection. And look, I am sitting on the side of the road. There is no space for me. My children and I are sitting on the ground, and we sleep on the street. I slept yesterday here on the street. I didn't know where to go. We walked 4 hours until our legs hurt, and our hands hurt because of the belongings that we were carrying. We were carrying our children and our bags.
The Israeli army has provided evidence demonstrating that Hamas uses hospitals as terror command centers and weapon storage facilities. Military spokesperson Daniel Hagari inspected the Ranchi hospital in Gaza, showcasing the weaponry and ammunition kept inside the hospital premises. Here's a report.
This is Ranchi Hospital. And this is the place where I showed you the tunnel. I want you to see. Look at what Hamas is holding inside the hospital. I want you to understand, this kind of gear is a gear for a major fight. People shooting RPGs from hospitals. This is Hamas firing RPGs for hospitals. The world has to understand who is Israel fighting against. They were all used in the massacre of the 7th of October. They even have bullets in this motorcycle. So they came back from the massacre on the 7th of October. We can see the ventilation air that was done improvisely to this area. And we can see infrastructures that was built in here. You're now entering into the room where we suspect the hostages were being held. I want you to look at this room. People are putting curtains with nothing above, just wall. No reason to put here a curtain unless you want to film hostages and deliver movies. Says, we are in an operation. The operation against Israel started in the 7th of October. This is a Guardian list where every terrorist writes his name and every terrorist has his own shift. Next to a house of a terrorist, this is one of the senior terrorists who is the head of the operational naval operations that led the raids into Israel. His house is 200 yards from the hospital of Ranchi. Next to his house, there is a tunnel. The tunnel is let down more than 20 meters down. The rowboat found a door that is bulletproof, it's explosives proof, so it looks like a hard evidence, a clear evidence that the hospital direction is connected. This is a covered tunnel. It's part of the same floor and it slides down here.
Israel's allies are seemingly divided on Israeli action in Gaza, especially its offensive at the Al-Shifa hospital. The United States, Israel's most staunch supporter, for instance, seems to be uncomfortable at the moment, especially with the death toll in Gaza rising. There seem to be rifts emerging within the U.S. State Department over the Biden administration's approach to the war, as acknowledged by U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken in an email to staff. The U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan advised Israel to not engage in firefighting in hospitals and to protect innocent lives just a few days ago. National Security spokesperson John Kirby has said the U.S. has intelligence that Hamas is a command center under Al-Shifa hospital in Gaza City in what is being seen as a backing for Israel's claims officially. In France, President Emmanuel Macron just a few days ago had asked Israel to stop killing babies and women in Gaza. However, Macron faced a backlash over his Israel killing babies remarks and has now clarified that he didn't want to accuse Tel Aviv of intentionally harming civilians in Gaza. The UK is another strong ally of Israel, and the UK Royal Air Force is offering aerial surveillance support to Israel in its ongoing operation against Hamas terrorists in Gaza. The UK is treading a thin line, though. On the one hand, aiding and supporting Israel, but on the other, urging Israel to take all measures to protect civilian lives in Gaza. The European Union's initial unconditional support for Israel has evolved to calling for humanitarian pauses in the conflict. The European Union is now emphasizing that Israel's right to self-defense should be exercised as per international law in light of many Europeans protesting against the EU's policy regarding the conflict. Arab and Islamic nations including Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, Oman, Egypt and Jordan, as well as regional entities like the Gulf Cooperation Council and the Organization of Islamic Cooperation have all issued statements condemning Israel's bombing of the Qatar Committee for the Reconstruction of Gaza's headquarters. The Qatari Foreign Ministry has strongly criticized the Israeli bombing, labeling it as a blatant aggression and an extension of Israel's policy of targeting civilians, hospitals and refugee shelters. Qatar has called on Israel to hold its misleading justifications and information on these attacks, as it put it. The Organization of Islamic Cooperation has condemned the bombing of the headquarters, viewing it within the framework of the ongoing military aggression targeting Palestinian civilians and civilian infrastructure in the Gaza Strip. Now, as the Israel-Hamas war enters its 40th day, let's tell you about the difference between a ceasefire and humanitarian pauses. Remember, Israel agreed in consultation with the US to have certain humanitarian pauses for 4 hours every day. Now, humanitarian pause has been sought by many of Israel's allies, and ceasefire has been sought by countries like China and Russia, along with the Arab bloc. A humanitarian pause is a temporary cessation of hostilities purely for humanitarian purposes, such as letting in humanitarian aid or even the release of hostages. Such pauses are usually limited to a set period and a certain area. A ceasefire, on the other hand, is suspension of fighting agreed upon by the parties to a conflict. It allows parties engaged in the conflict to explore the path of dialogue. Israel's army has released a video to show soldiers finding weapons inside Hamas's buildings in Gaza. In a post on social media platform X, earlier Twitter, the Israeli army has said the soldiers secured the Hamas legislature and government building, the Hamas police headquarters, and an engineering facility used for weapon production and development. Small arms, rifles, bullets, the outer shells of precision-guided bombs appear amongst other ammunition in the Israeli military's footage. Israel has been striking armed groups in the West Bank with increasing intensity as it wages a war on Hamas and the Islamic Jihad in the Gaza Strip, another territory where Palestinians seek to establish an independent state. The Israeli army released footage on the 14th of November showing its soldiers carrying out military operations and dismantling Hamas centers and capabilities in Al-Shati in Gaza. The strikes targeted what Israel claimed were Hamas locations. Another video displayed Israeli tanks and armored vehicles during a military operation in Al-Shati, cited as a central Hamas center in the Gaza enclave. Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant has said Israeli forces are in control of the center of Gaza City, having defeated Hamas in the northern part of Gaza Strip. Israel has vowed to wipe out Hamas after their terrorists burst across the fence around the Gaza enclave and rampaged through Israeli towns, killing 1,200 Israelis, mostly civilians, on the 7th of October. They also took with them close to 250 hostages back to Gaza. This was, of course, the deadliest day in Israel's 75-year history, but in its response, including a total siege and constant bombardment of the crowded enclave, Israeli forces have killed thousands of civilians and alarmed countries around the world. Israel says Hamas is to blame for the harm being caused to civilians because the fighters hide among them.
You have seen the Golani soldiers sitting in the Gaza parliament. This is of the great importance. I can say to you that in the north of the Gaza Strip, Hamas has lost control. And in fact, we are in control in the entire central theater of the Gaza Strip, in the north of the Strip, and in particular in Gaza City. We are committed to the two goals and the two goals only. First, to defeat Hamas, to eliminate its infrastructure, its government and its military. Second, to return the hostages. When I pressed to begin operations in the first 2 weeks, one of the primary reasons was to ramp up pressure on Hamas. Amplifying pressure on Hamas is what raised the responsibility. If we sat on the fence, these issues would remain unsolved for years. This ways, chances are improving. I hope they will turn out for the best.
Heavy rains have added to the already existing woes of Palestinians in Gaza, bringing fresh challenges for the people. Many living in Gaza are now in makeshift tents following weeks of bombardments by the Israelis. The rainy season brings along fears of flooding, and the densely populated enclave's sewage system is at risk of being overwhelmed.
Streams of water ran through a UN shelter in Khan Yunis in southern Gaza on Tuesday after heavy rain. The downpour brought with it new concerns and challenges for Palestinians, many of whom are homeless and living in makeshift tents after weeks of Israeli bombardment. Fayez Suru is one of them.
Winter is a nightmare. The situation we're facing now will be a nightmare. In the past, I used to wish for winter to arrive and for the rain to fall, for the trees to start to blossom and grow so that we can harvest, when everything looks so beautiful. But right now, I pray every day for it not to rain. We are living in tents, nothing that can protect us. When the rain falls, we will drown.
The start of the rainy season and the possibility of flooding increased fears that the already damaged enclave sewage system will be overwhelmed, and then disease will spread. Winters can be wet and cold in Gaza, and the enclave is sometimes hit by flooding. Juliet Touma is the Director of Communications at the UN Palestinian Refugee Agency.
When I would go to Gaza and there would be just a few drops of rain, the streets would just flood because the systems are not good enough to absorb and do all the, the absorption and all the sewage and water management and all of this. So the streets would really flood. This is in a normal day.
The World Health Organization said last week that Gaza faced an increased risk of disease spreading because Israeli air bombardments had disrupted the health system. The airstrikes have also limited access to clean water and caused people to crowd in shelters. WHO spokesperson Margaret Harris.
We're very concerned. We've already got outbreaks of diarrheal diseases. We've already got recorded well over 30,000 cases when we would normally expect 2,000 cases in the same period.
The Norwegian Refugee Council said the start of the rainy season could mark the most difficult week in Gaza since the conflict began. And other aid agencies have said trying to simply meet the daily needs of Gazans has meant they've been unable to plan ahead for potential flooding. Israel vowed to wipe out Hamas after the October 7th attack. Over 1,200 people were killed and about 240 were taken hostage, according to Israel. Medical officials in Hamas-run Gaza say over 11,000 people have been killed in Israel strikes since then.
A crowd formed outside the Al Salam mill, one of the biggest in Gaza and located in the center of the Gaza Strip. Some of the people here were desperate to find food as Israel's weeks-long offensive against Hamas in the enclave has considerably reduced essential supplies. People, on an average, have been queuing up for 4 to 6 hours to receive half the normal ration, including breads. Tragedy struck Jabalia yet again, where Palestinians helplessly searched through the wreckage of homes razed by an Israeli airstrike on Monday. Hamas reports that over 30 lives were lost and many others were injured. 12 residential buildings were obliterated. In the northern Gaza Strip's Jabalia refugee camp, Palestinians are desperately searching for survivors following an airstrike that hit a street near a school where displaced Gazans had sought shelter. The community is grappling with the aftermath, navigating through rubble in the quest for those affected by the attack. Palestinians, including children, were urgently transported to Al Nasser Hospital in southern Gaza on the 14th of November. That's yesterday, after an airstrike targeted a residential building. The strike hit a family home in the Khan Yunis camp. An eyewitness expressed concern that this site is supposed to be a safe camp and all the houses were destroyed with the residents still inside them. One airstrike after another, relentless bombing by Israeli forces on Gaza since the 7th of October, when the Hamas terrorists first carried out those massive terror attacks on Israeli soil, leaving 1,200 Israelis, most of them civilians, dead. But in the aftermath of that massacre in the last 5 weeks, thousands of Palestinians have been killed and thousands of others have been left injured. In Gaza City, smoke rises from a destroyed building amid ongoing fierce battles between Hamas and Israel. The war between Israel and Hamas, as we said, has entered the 40th day. According to the official figures collated by the Hamas-run health ministry, at least 11,300 Palestinians have been killed in the Israeli counter-offensive so far. On the 7th of October, when Hamas carried out terror attacks on Israel, 1,200 Israelis, most of them civilians, were killed. All right, let's now show you some visuals that are coming in from Khan Yunis in Gaza, where a Red Crescent truck is seen pulling up at the site. The Palestinian Red Crescent said on Tuesday that it was able to vacate the Al-Quds hospital in Gaza City. It said the move came after more than 10 days of siege, during which medical and humanitarian supplies were prevented from reaching the hospital. At the hospital, there was a serious threat to the lives of everyone present inside because of the ongoing and relentless Israeli bombardment around the hospital, and there was firing on those inside as well, in addition to a complete power outage and depletion. Possible to continue providing the necessary medical care to the patients under those conditions. The patients have been transferred to hospitals in southern parts of Gaza. Hospitals are already suffering from fuel shortages and an acute scarcity of medicines and other critical medical supplies. All right, let's now get you an update from Somalia. Distressing conditions continue in Somalia's Dalo district, where homes have been forsaken, roads transformed into rivers, and concerns arise over depleting food supplies. The impact of severe flooding that has severed access routes to the Somali town, exacerbating fears of imminent food shortages.
In Somalia's Dalo district, homes are abandoned, roads have turned into rivers, and food is running out. Severe flooding, which has caused death and destruction across East Africa, has cut roads into Dalo town. Shop owner Farhan Ali Abdullah says there are no supplies coming in.
We can't bring goods in by plane. There is a serious shortage of goods, fuel, food, and all other things in the city. Really, we will be feeling the impact.
The United Nations has described the floods in Somalia and its neighbours as a once-in-a-century event. Around 1.6 million people in Somalia could be affected, the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs said last week. In Dolo, some say moving around the worst-hit areas of towns and villages has become dangerous. Dolo resident Tamad Hussein Abdi fears what might be waiting beneath the surface.
We cannot go to some of the places in the town because of the high level of water. We are afraid of crocodiles and other animals in the flood.
Some families here have been moved to camps for internally displaced people. Others have stayed, hoping to find a way to pick up the pieces.
A new report compiled by more than a dozen US agencies and hundreds of scientists says climate change is increasingly harming Americans with intensifying heat waves, wildfires and extreme flooding. The National Climate Assessment, which is released roughly every 5 years, found that nearly every aspect of American life is under growing threat from climate change. Here's a report.
A new report compiled by more than a dozen U.S. agencies and hundreds of scientists says that climate change is increasingly harming Americans, with intensifying heat waves, wildfires, and extreme flooding. The National Climate Assessment, which is released roughly every 5 years, found that nearly every aspect of American life is under growing threat from climate change. On Tuesday, President Joe Biden said the report was the most comprehensive yet.
This assessment shows us in clear scientific terms that climate change is impacting all regions, all sectors of the United States, not just some, all.
Biden also announced new funding to bolster the U.S. power grid and reduce flood risks.
Along with this assessment, I'm announcing $6 billion in new investments from the Inflation Reduction Act and the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law to make communities across the country more resilient to climate change.
Biden said that last year alone, natural disasters caused $178 billion in damages in the United States, often hitting the most vulnerable the hardest. According to the report, climate change is also increasingly imposing costs to Americans, as threats such as extreme heat push up medical bills, and as prices rise for weather-related insurance.
When a climate disaster happens, we pay either through insurance companies, through government relief, or paying money sort of after the fact.
Ted Scher, a professor of ecosystem science at Northern Arizona University, believes more action is still badly needed, but says the outlook was not all doom and gloom.
Sometimes the public focuses and hears about the climate disasters and often thinks that maybe there's not much action, but there are these bright spots. So we've, as a nation, have reduced our greenhouse gas emissions, even as our population has gone up and our economy has increased. We've been able to do that while decreasing the total amount of greenhouse gas emissions.
The assessment marks the fifth such report by the U.S. government since 2000. It was the first produced since 2018, when the administration of then-President Donald Trump was dismantling rules meant to rein in climate warming emissions. Trump, who denies the science of climate change, dismissed the 2018 assessment.
That's all the time we have on this show. Thanks so much for watching. Stay tuned to News 9 Live for all the latest news updates from around the country and the world.
Hamas attacks Israel. Israel Defense Forces strike back at Hamas. As the war unfolds, watch the comprehensive